Hey guys, what's up? It's Base Reality here with League of Legends MVP. Today we're going to be talking about mid lane priority, mid lane roaming, and how to create global pressure from the middle lane. Alright guys, so first topic on our list for mid lane is going to be lane priority. So exactly what is lane priority? Well, lane priority just means that you have tempo in the lane. It means that you're making the enemy mid laner respond to what you do and not the other way around. It's kind of like going first in a chess match, except over and over again. So how exactly do we get lane priority? Well, there's a few different factors that are going to impact what lane priority is and who gets it. That's going to usually be the matchup between the mid laners, how aggressive the enemy junglers are towards the mid lane, and the individual skill of the players themselves. For today's video, we're going to be using Ekko. Now, some champions have an easier time gaining lane priority, and Ekko is definitely at the top of that list. Here, we can see Ekko is constantly queuing the creep wave, and Syndra has to clear under her tower. Now, this is causing Ekko to have tempo in the lane. Even though Syndra can CS fine under the tower, Ekko is free to make the first roaming move. Constantly shoving like this is only dangerous if you can't get the creep wave to hit the tower. From here, we have positive tempo. Syndra should always have to respond to you queuing the wave, and so she has to clear her creeps under the tower, while you have about 15 to 20 seconds before the next wave comes. This is a period where you would transition your tempo into roaming and creating pressure on the map. When roaming, you'll have to take into account a couple of different factors. The major factors are going to be the enemy jungler, where the wards are, how easy it is for you to gank the side lanes or invade the enemy jungle, and if the mid lane has good follow potential. Now, with each of those factors, they come with their own special set of rules. So, let's start out with junglers. How quickly and how efficiently you can roam is going to be incredibly dependent on the enemy jungler. With how many junglers there are in the game right now that come with a high amount of damage, roaming can be a little bit scary. Mid lane champions like Ekko are going to be safer for roaming than someone like Syndra because he has a pretty low cooldown on a dash that can also get over walls on his E. With that being said, what's the first rule for junglers? The first rule I like to ask myself is, can the enemy jungler give me enough trouble that their mid laner will have time to come help them out? Champions like Ivern are the perfect example of someone who can waste enough time to get some backup. You know, champions like these aren't the scariest, but they can definitely be a pain. So, you don't have to take the safest routes, but if they find you, you might have to be willing to give up the roam. Our second rule is going to be, can the enemy jungler kill me in a 1v1? If the enemy jungler can kill you in a 1v1, you have two options. Figure out where they are and roam to the other side of the map, or roam safely by taking longer routes through your jungle instead of through the river. Usually these types of champions are going to be duelist. People like Graves, Rengar, and Kha'Zix are great examples of current meta champions that you can often find in the jungle. Last but not least for jungling is going to be, how quick is the enemy jungler and what side of the map are they currently on? If the enemy jungler is someone like Rengar or Kha'Zix who can use their ultimates to get into a fight really quickly, or even someone like Hecarim who can run across the map to help a gank out with Ghost and his E, then this has to be taken into consideration. If you don't know where the enemy jungler is, then you have to make the decision based on how the game is going. If you do know where they are, you want to try and roam to the opposite side of the map to avoid getting counter-ganked. Once all the jungling thought processes are through, we can start thinking about the enemy wards. Now, personally, I think that wards are a bit overrated and can almost always be ignored if you're ahead, especially when you're taking into consideration the junglers. What I mean by ignored is running straight over them. However, if you're behind, you might want to go around the wards, or intentionally walk over the wards with no intent to actually gank. Avoiding the wards is pretty difficult unless your team is actively communicating with you. Otherwise, it's a guessing game of trial and error. I don't usually like having to retreat too far into our jungle to roam, unless I've already taken the mid tower and I'm trying to be sneaky, or I'm so far behind that I have to. Now, what about intentionally walking over wards? This is usually to create pressure when you had none. It's a trick to gain attention in order to take pressure off of your team and put it onto you, and it also wastes the enemy's time. Often, you can bait junglers to come for a counter gank where you weren't planning on ganking anyway, and sometimes the enemy mid laner will come to try and counter gank too, and you just walk away. Time for rule number 3, gank potential. This comes down to how easy it's going to be for you to gank the side lane. If your bottom lane is super passive, like Sivir and Soraka before level 5, and the enemy team is someone like a Zyra support, it's going to be really hard for you to get in there and get a kill. Stuff like this is going to change each and every game, and not only based on what your team is playing, but what the enemy team is playing. So always take into account, what kind of CC is down there, if it's good CC from your team, or if the enemy has CC that can stop you from coming in. Finally, our last major rule for roaming is, can the enemy mid lane follow me? If the enemy mid laner has good follow potential, you have to make sure your gank isn't dragged out. Communicate with your lanes and find out if they have summoner spells before you hard commit. If they have no summoner spells, you can usually fully commit, but if they do have summoner spells, try to burn them and then decide if you can still make the kill happen. Always remember that burning enemy summoner spells is a successful gank. Champions with good follow-up potential usually have a little bit of built-in mobility or mobility on their ultimate. Someone like LeBlanc, who can get there pretty quick, Ahri with her ultimate who can catch up to you, or even Ryze who can hit you with a flank if you overextend a little bit too much. Using the first two things we talked about, which is taking advantage of your lane priority and then transferring that into roaming, you create global pressure overall. Global pressure consists of a ton of different things that don't have to be specifically gank related. Just leaving over and over again is going to put some pressure on the mid lane and the side lanes. You can roam into the enemy jungler and get some wards down, take their jungle camps, you can take Scuttle Crab, you can even roam to your side lanes to take out control wards when you know where they are. That way when your jungler comes around, they won't have to deal with them. When you get the hang of putting all of these things together, one step at a time, first learning how to gain lane priority, transferring that to roaming, and letting that create huge amounts of pressure from just you alone, your mid lane game will step up a ton. In the video, I'm deliberately not showing too many examples because I want you to take these questions and apply them to every single game you play. Not only that, but it's going to make you a better player in the future if you can apply these things for yourself. Now, there's going to be a few tricky champions, so if you guys are interested in seeing a very specific champion and a bunch of different scenarios for stuff like this, please let me know in the comments below. In the future, we'll eventually go much more in depth into specific topics, like an entire video on lane priority or entire videos on roaming. But this video is to get you started on thinking about the kind of concepts that you can use in the mid lane and getting you comfortable with them so that you can go into those videos with some personal experience and move on from there. That wraps it up for this video, and I'll see you guys next time. If you're interested in something a little bit more personal, check out the video description for more.